When it comes to punctuation marks in English, there is probably no more disagreement between various authorities than about when and how to use hyphens and dashes. There is almost nothing one can say about them that everyone agrees upon. However, as with most controversial aspects of English grammar and punctuation, the most important thing is to be consistent and, where possible, to follow simple rules. So let's try and find some rules we can apply. In this lesson, I want to try and answer 3 questions. What do they look like? How are they used? And how is their use changing? So what do these punctuation marks look like? Well, they're all lines, but they're not all the same length. Here's a hyphen. It's the shortest. And here are its close relatives, the dashes, the N rule and the M rule. N rules and M rules are often called N dashes and M dashes, particularly in America. As you will see, these should not be thought of as interchangeable. But even those who know the hyphen and the dash are used for different purposes will often use hyphens in place of dashes. This is usually because they don't know how to navigate a computer keyboard, and they often say, I want a dash, but I can't find one, so I'll just use the more easily available hyphen. All computer keyboards will give you a hyphen, but you may have to look a little harder for the dash. Now, typographically, the N dash is similar in length to the hyphen, and often it's not easy to distinguish, so I think it's simpler if we forget that one for the moment and focus on the more obviously different hyphen and M rule dash, which from now on I'll simply call the dash, as that's how it's usually referred to in British English. So how are they used? Let's look at hyphens first. The hyphen is an essential punctuation mark used in formal English, where it's used primarily to join 2 or more words to make a single expression. Let's look at some examples. Up to date, Anglo-German, non-toxic. We also routinely place hyphens between the components of written numbers. Look at these examples. 63, 47, 29. And similarly, when we write fractions in words. 2/5, 3/8, 11/16. And we use hyphens in compound adjectives. A 5-year prison term, a 12th century manuscript, a blue-green sea. We also hyphenate words to avoid confusion. Look at these examples. Reform and reform mean different things. Recovered and recovered also mean different things. A patient may have recovered from an illness, but an old sofa might be recovered. We also use hyphens to sometimes make words easier to say, especially when different parts of a word end and begin with the same letter. We get something called letter collision. Look at these examples. Semi-independent, with the 2 I's clashed together. The hyphen makes it easier to say. Similarly, sword dance and post-traumatic. So that's hyphens. What about dashes? Unlike hyphens, dashes don't join words. They separate words and phrases in a sentence. As such, they are non-essential because there are often alternative forms of punctuation we might use. Let's look at some examples. Their economy, if you can call it that, was built on nothing more than wishful thinking. Here, a pair of dashes are being used in place of brackets or parentheses. We are hopeful for a quick outcome and a successful one. Life is a series of choices, difficult ones. Here, dashes are being used essentially in place of a semicolon and a colon. There has also always been a rather artistic use of the dash. A number of poets, like Emily Dickinson, Rudyard Kipling and Lord Byron, were big fans, as was the author Jane Austen. The dash has been used by some to almost indicate a whispered aside. It has been used to create a staccato effect in sentences as a character jumps from one idea to another, and it has been used to reflect a flow of interconnected ideas. In other words, the dash can be used for a whole range of literary purposes that our more formal, technical, professional academic writing may have little use for. All of this has resulted in the dash being viewed as a relatively informal punctuation mark. But when we consider the hyphen and the dash, how is their use changing? Well, when it comes to hyphens, these often change with fashion. As new words are coined, they're often created from a composite of different words, and as such hyphens are used. But with their increasing use, as we become more familiar with them, the hyphens often disappear. Look at these examples. Biomedical versus biomedical. Originally, it was written with a hyphen. Now you will never see it with a hyphen. Radioactivity, when it was first coined, had a hyphen. And perhaps more recently, email had a hyphen, and now routinely it doesn't. What about spaces around these punctuation marks? While hyphens never have spaces before or after them, dashes may or may not. Look at these examples. He was surprised the same as us. He was surprised the same as us. In one, we have no spaces. In the second, we have spaces before and after. The former is how you will see the dash used in older texts, but increasingly modern usage is allowing spaces to creep in. As always, pick a way to do it and stick with it. When it comes to dashes, there is also now a change in acceptability. There's been a shift away from viewing these as merely informal or artistic forms of punctuation. The dash as a substitute for the semicolon or the colon is becoming increasingly acceptable, as are pairs of dashes used in place of brackets. However, such relaxation in the use of punctuation does move at different rates in different fields, and it's always important to know what the current accepted norms are in your own area. Because of this, I usually still advise anyone writing formal, professional, technical or academic English ideally to avoid the use of the dash or at least minimise its use. Once the dash is let out of the punctuation bag, it does have a habit of appearing in every sentence and makes our writing take on a rather breathless air, perhaps even becoming a stream of uncontrolled consciousness. So do take care with your dashes. In this lesson, we've looked at what hyphens and dashes look like, how they are used, and importantly, how their use may be changing. Let's leave the last word to someone who was not a great fan of the hyphen, the statesman Winston Churchill, who said, "I am in revolt about your hyphens. One must regard the hyphen as a blemish to be avoided wherever possible." If you would like to find out more about writing, why not subscribe to this channel? Or take a look at 2 of my books, which were written specially for those who find it difficult. Also, you can keep in touch on Twitter and follow my blog, The Business of Discovery. I look forward to seeing you next time.